Okay, so now we're going to look at section 7.2, which continues to talk about trigonometry. The objective is I can use trigonometric ratios in a right triangle to find missing side lengths if I know an angle measure. So it sounds similar to yesterday, or lesson 1. First, we're going to look at our calculator, though, because we're going to start using our graphing calculator. Scientifics will work as well on this, but if you're using a graphing calculator, you have to make sure your calculator is set to degrees. So take out your calculator. You want to go to the home screen, over under Documents to number 5 is Settings, and then Document Settings. And if you go down to the second tab, you can see the word angle. If it doesn't say degrees, you want to click that and put it. Or click on degrees. You do want to make it your default. I do encourage you to make sure you check this every time. If it's in radians, you will get the wrong answers even if you're doing the right work. So your calculator has to be in degrees. So I'm going to tab down until I get to make default and click. And yes, I do want it to save it. And again, now we want to continue to working in new documents. Don't work in your scratch pad, as sometimes it doesn't carry over. So now that our calculators are set, we can continue on. We're going to use our calculator a lot today for tonight's homework. So here's how we're going to use trigonometry to find the missing side length. So if I look at, my screen's frozen, but that's okay. So I'm down here, and it says, here's how we use trig to find the missing side length. Step 1, notice the angle you know. In this case, we're talking about angle 71. So that goes back to what we were talking about last lesson. So let's try switch it over here. Okay, let's try again. Okay, here we go. So step 1, angle 71 is right here. So that's the one we're talking about. And now we're going to label our triangle as we talked about. So the right angle is across from the right angle, which is hypotenuse. The side across from 71 is opposite, because again, 71 is the angle I care about. And by default, that side length 12 is going to be the adjacent. So step 1 is always to label those 3 angles. Step 2 says notice which sides you care about. Okay, so in this case, I care about 12 because they gave it to me, and so the adjacent, and I care about the opposite because that's x, and that's what they're asking me to find. And now we're going to set up our trig ratio. We're remembering SOHCAHTOA. I need to figure out which of those 3 uses the adjacent and the opposite, the 3 I care about. And I remember that TOA is tangent theta equals opposite over adjacent. And so you can see that I use tangent to set it up. Well, once I understand this, then I can substitute it in. Tangent of what? Theta is the angle we're talking about. So that's why we do tangent of 71 equals opposite, which in this case is just x, over adjacent, which is 12. So we set that up, and then we can see to solve that for x, I would multiply both sides by x. Notice that I put the 12 in front of. In the step 4, when we solve for x, it has tangent of 71 times 12. These parentheses are critical if you do it that way. And now, because I transferred my calculator into degrees, now I can go to a new document. No, I don't want to save anything previous, and we're just going to calculate to find tangent. So again, I'm going to write the 12 first. So we said we would do 12 times, and then to find tangent, I have a trig button right here. I go over to tangent, and then it was 71, the degrees, because it says it is in there, and that's how we get the 34.85. As I go back to my document, we can try it down here. Okay, so again, in this case, number 1, I've got angle 33, so I'm going to label my triangle from that. 8 is across from the right angle, so that's hypotenuse. Across from the 33 is opposite. The side touching the 33 that I don't, that is the hypotenuse, is adjacent. So I label it opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Now step 2, I figure out which sides I care about. Again, I care about the one that has the x, and I care about the side length that I know. And again, because in this case, I care about O and H, I refer back up here to SOHCAHTOA, and I see that the S has O and H in it, which means that I know the sine of theta is equal to the opposite over hypotenuse. That's how I choose the trig function that I use. Once I have that, I plug in what I know. Remember, theta represents the angle, so in this case we're talking about 33 degrees. Opposite is x, is what I'm trying to find, and hypotenuse is 8. To solve for x, I multiply both sides by 8. I type 8 sine 33 into my calculator. 8 times trig button sine 33, enter, and I get 4.357. So I go back to my page and I type in 4.357, and that is my final answer. Okay, and number 2, I follow the same process. Hypotenuse is across from this. The side across from the 28 degrees is opposite. And in this case, the x is the adjacent. So I highlight the things that I care about. I care about opposite because that's a number, and the adjacent because it's the x. And now I'm looking at ca because cosine. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm looking at tangent because tangent of theta is equal to opposite over adjacent. Now please pay close attention to this one when we do our algebra. When I substitute in, I get tangent, the theta is the 28 degrees, equals opposite is 3.2 over adjacent, which is x. So a lot of students make some mistakes when they go to solve this one. Please know that because the x is on the bottom, I actually have to move that first. It's being divided by, so I can multiply both sides by x. I get x tangent 28 degrees equals 3.2. And now because it's x times tangent of 28, I'm going to divide both sides by tangent 28 degrees. So I get x equals, I go to my calculator. This is one of those cases I like to use my fun fraction button, control divide. And again, I had 3.2 divided by, go to my trig button. That's what that was. Go to my trig button. Go to tangent, and it was 28. Because my calculator's in degrees, I get a side length of 6.081. 18, sorry. 18. Okay, your job is to pause this now and try the 4 problems on the back again. It asks for, it says you can just do some of it, but go ahead and pause it and try all of them. Hopefully, as you went through, oh, there's my second page. So I'm going to show you my work now. Again, this is opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent. I care about adjacent and hypotenuse. So I'm looking at, I'm going to write down SOHCAHTOA just at the top of my paper so I can quickly look at it. So adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So I'm looking at the cosine of 42 degrees. Okay, because I have adjacent and hypotenuse. So then I solve for x, I would get cosine of 42 equals 7 over x. This is that case where I have to multiply both sides by x first. I get x cosine 42 equals 7. Divide by cosine 42. Type 7 divided by cosine 42 into my calculator. I got 9.419. In the second one, you should have labeled the 4 as the hypotenuse, this side as opposite, and this side as adjacent, which means I need adjacent and hypotenuse, which again is cosine. So it's cosine of 23 degrees. It's always of the angle, not of the side measure like DEF. And again, because I have adjacent and hypotenuse. When I set this up, I do cosine of 23 equals adjacent, which is x, over hypotenuse, which is 4. And you can see this is the easier solving. I just multiply both sides by 4, type it into my calculator, I get 3.682. So it's when the x ends up on the bottom, or in the denominator of the fraction, it takes the extra step of solving. Okay, number 3, the x is the hypotenuse, the 4 is the opposite. This side would then be the adjacent, but I care about opposite and hypotenuse, and so again, it's at the top of my paper, but I'm using SOHCAHTOA. And again, sine is opposite and hypotenuse, so I'm dealing with the sine of 58 here. When I go to solve for it, I do sine of 58 equals opposite, which is 4, over hypotenuse, which is x. X is on the bottom, so this is my two-step problem. Multiply by x. I get x sine 58 equals 4. Divide both sides by sine of 58. I get x equals 4.717. And last but not least, in this case, the x is the opposite. This is the hypotenuse, and the 2 is the adjacent. Tangent is the thing that uses opposite and adjacent, so we're talking about tangent of 62. When I set it up, I do tangent of 62 equals opposite, which is x, over adjacent, which is 2. So once again, the easier solving, multiply both sides by 2. Type 2 tangent 62 in your calculator, you get 3.761. Alright, so that's the lesson for today. How do you decide if it's which trig function to use? It's based on the two sides you are dealing with. And again, we're talking about opposite, adjacent, and or hypotenuse. You'll always be talking about 2 of the 3. What measurement always goes in parentheses? That's the angle measure. And we clarify that just because those are some of the common mistakes students make. All right, thanks for listening. Now you can finish up your 7-2 homework, and by Friday you should have 7-1 and 7-2 done. Thanks.